Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Today is April the 23rd, 2017. And our guest today is author Alan Baxter. Thanks, Alan, for being on the show.
For having me.
And Mr. Philip Fracassi, also a writer, is going to be doing the interview today. So
I'm very nervous.
No. If this helps, just remember that if everything goes well, it's because of me, and if anything is screwed up, it's because of you. So
right.
You can blame me for anything. I'm only going to be here today, and guys carry on.
Right.
So anything goes wrong, I'll take it.
Right. Fall guy, perfect.
Blame the guy who's not usually here.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we do short introductions for the rest of us, and then Philip can introduce Alan, and Alan can introduce himself as well. Let's start with Rick. We'll work our way over.
I'm Rick Lay. I'm a writer, and I'm currently researching an article on the god from Lovecraft's The Temple.
Oh, okay. And Phil.
Philip Fracassi. I'm a author and a screenwriter. My latest collection is Behold the Void.
Matt.
My name is Matt Carpenter. I am currently editing a book called Pickman's Gallery.
You have enough stories for that now?
I'm working on it. Don't rush me.
I know. This is an opportunity to give out the submissions email address if you need to. If you don't need to, that's fine.
Sure. Cthulhu Story Subs at AOL.com.
At where.com? Sorry, or where?
AOL.
What's AOL stand for?
You've got mail.
That was
all right.
It's cool, man. It's retro.
Yeah. You've been doing it so long it became cool again.
His modem is made
like
of wood.
my clothes.
Right.
So it's Cthulhu. Cthulhu Story Subs at AOL.com.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. All right. And I'm Mike Davis with Lovecraft eZine. And Phil, you want to say a little something about Alan, and then let him say something as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So so I'll start by just telling you what I know as far as Alan's biography, and I'll let him fill in a lot of the blanks. But I actually discovered Alan's work most recently in a collection that came out this past year called Crow Shine,
Yes.
which is right here for those who are watching in video, which is fantastic. Really beautiful, literary, dark, kind of sad at points, but in a really good way, and it's excellent writing. And with a Laird Barron blurb on the cover, so you don't take my word for it. And then I went in and read one of Alan's books from his Alex Kane series, which is called Bound, which we'll also get into. I read the first one, which is this is the U.S. cover. All three have already come out overseas from where I'm sitting, but only the first one in America. And yeah, so the background to Alan, this is from his website. Now, again, I'll let Alan, you tell me if this has been updated since. But Alan is the author of the Alex Kane series, Bound, Obsidian, and Abduction, Urban Fantasy. That's put out by Harper Voyager, Australia, and by, oh gosh, I can just look at my Ragnarok.
It's Ragnarok.
Yeah, in the US. And then also Realm Shift and Mage Sign, which is two books called The Balance. And then he's co-authored several books with David Wood. And as I mentioned, Crowshine is his last collection. And his short fiction has appeared in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction and Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and which are two pretty big heavy hitters. And he's won several awards. I'm just probably mispronouncing it. The Aurealis Awards. The Aurealis Awards, the Australian.
I haven't
Shadows.
won one of those yet, though. I've been nominated for a few, but I haven't won any yet.
And then you were nominated several times for the Australian Shadows Awards, which is, it sounds like the Australian equivalent of the Stoker, maybe, which is put out by the American or the
it's a bit like that. Yeah, a bit like Set the Shadows is a juried award, not a popular award. So it's judged, not voted. So I've won 3 of those now. I just won for best collection for Coyne, which was kind of mind blowing. So that just
congratulations.
happened. Thank you, man. Yeah, that just happened like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, there's 3 national awards in Australia. There's the Aurealis Awards, which are science fiction, fantasy, horror, right across genre, which are a judged award, and I've had a few nominations there. The Shadows Awards are for dark fiction and horror in particular, again, a national award that's judged, and I've won 3 of those now and been nominated for a couple more. And then there's the Ditmar Award, which is a little bit like an Australian Hugo. It's a popular award across the country, and Coyne's actually up for best collection in the Ditmars now, which gets announced in June as well. So Coyne got nominated in the Aurealis and the Shadows and the Ditmars. So it's the first time I've ever sort of had the trifecta of award nominations. I won the Shadows, didn't win the Aurealis, and the Ditmars we've yet to see. So Australian awards are a bit weird like that.
It's amazing.
Hey, Phil, I've got a funny story to tell you about Coyne real quick. I told this to Alan when I did the video test. But, you know, you suggested Alan as a guest, and I was like, yeah, sure, he sounds like he'd be a great guest. And I told you I had not read any of his books. Well, in the meantime, I'm just browsing on my Kindle, you know, like a couple of weeks later. I don't remember exactly what the time frame was, but it was a bit later, and came across Coyne, and really didn't even realize, didn't put the names together in my head for another week or so after that. You know, I'm still in the middle of it. So synchronicity, as you said yesterday, Alan.
Yeah.
So yeah, Alan, do you want to just give us some background on yourself and your writing career and how long you've been doing it and how you started?
Sure. It's a difficult question to answer because, I mean, I started taking writing seriously in my 20s, really. I've always, I can't remember a time when I wasn't writing and making up stories. I used to do heaps role-playing in my teens and early 20s, loads of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun and Call of Duty, and most of those, basically, we tried everything on and off. Most thing we played probably the most of was Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Roleplay. And I used to be a games master because that way I could make up stories. So I used to enjoy running the games more than playing the games because I got to tell stories. So my first novels really are probably lost in mists of time around tables playing role-playing games. Then in my 20s, I decided I ought to start taking things a bit seriously and actually look for publication and actually finish a novel, because I'd started a few and kind of bottom drawed a few. And eventually, my first published novel was Realm Shift, and the sequel to that was Mage Sign. And I actually ended up self-publishing Realm Shift. It got to acquisitions at a couple of big publishers, sort of really nearly got published, and then didn't quite come through. And that was back in the day when self-publishing and ebooks were just first starting to take off. So I just decided to give it a stab because it looked interesting. Why the next book? And it did okay. And I wrote the next one, and then I put together a little sort of small press and put them both out again, reissued, and then they both got picked up by Griffinwood Press. So this is the very short version of the story, by the way, because obviously a lot complicated than this, and it goes over a long time. It started in, I think I first put out Realm Shift in 2006. Griffinwood Press picked up both books in the Balanced Duology in 2010. And I've just been continually writing since then, getting short stories published since around the same time as Realm Shift first came out. So probably 10 to 12 years published stories. And then I signed a deal with Voyager in 2013 for the Alex Kane series, which is a sort of dark urban fantasy thriller kind of trilogy. And that, in fact, I signed the 3-book deal, and I'd written the first 2 books, hadn't written the 3rd book, and my son was due to be born in October, and they gave me a January 1 deadline to deliver the 3rd, and it was April and I hadn't written it yet. So suddenly my life became intense to get those books done. And then Ragnarok picked them up in the US. So Voyager, we didn't give Voyager world rights because they only guaranteed publishing in Australia and New Zealand. So we gave them Australia and New Zealand rights, and my agent worked her magic and sold the rest of the world rights to Rag, which is why Philip has that version of Bound, which came out in December, and then Obsidian and Abduction come out together in the US in July. So by July, everything will be out everywhere. And that's about it, up to date on my on my publishing career. Lots of all sorts of things happening in between, of course, and a few other books here and there. But yeah, that's where things stand at the moment.
And your story, the short stories, you've been doing ever since, I'm assuming, since before and during Realm Shift. You just like magazine fantasy and science fiction, and those are big heavy hitters. Were those recent publications, or were they earlier in your career? How did that work?
A little bit more recently. Selling to fantasy and science fiction was a holy grail for me. I tried for 10 years to sell into that market, and as it turned out, I sold into the last issue that Gordon Van Gelder actually edited before he handed over to Charlie Finley. So it was a real sort of sweet success. I was walking there. It's a funny story because my son had owned, so it would have been around, I think it was around the beginning of 2014 that I sold that story to fantasy and science fiction, and it came out in the January-Feb issue of 2015. So it's only a couple of years ago that I made that hit. But my son was a little baby at the time, and I had him in one of those chest carrier things, and I was taking my dog for a walk down the lane just to get out of the house, and I grabbed the mail from the mailbox as I walked down the lane, and we're walking along, and I'm opening letters, and I see a letter from F&SF, and it was like, ah, shit, well, here it is, here's my rejection slip, because I've had dozens and dozens of them, I get, I'm like, but they usually come in a different envelope, this is old school. They were still sending these things actually through the post, even only a couple of years ago until Charlie took over. And I opened it up, and there was no letter. It was just a contract and a check. Wow. Just I've got my baby hanging on my chest and my dog sniffing around. I'm standing in this country lane in the middle of nowhere, just screaming and dancing around in a circle. I finally sold a story to an SF, and then I had to ring my friend and go, "Is this real? Is this real?" There's no letter. There's no acceptance. And she's like, "I think a check and a contract, works as an acceptance." So, yeah. So that was only 2014. I made that sale, and the Beneath Cease Disguised was, I think, a year or two before that. I've loved short stories forever. I was hooked on Roald Dahl short stories when I was just in my teens. Because I used to love Roald Dahl's kids books, and as 12 or 13 or something, I saw these books on my parents' by Roald Dahl and started reading them, and they're his weird, crazy short stories, and that blew my mind. And I started writing them more seriously around the same time as I was trying to sell Realm Shift, because there's that sort of accepted wisdom that, the more your name gets out there, the more likely you are to get picked up and stuff like that. People were saying, oh, you should write some short stories, prove to people you can write. Editors buy your work. Other editors think, oh, well, maybe he's worth looking at, and so on. So it was kind of, even though I loved short stories, it was kind of a commercial decision in a way to start writing them a bit more seriously in the hope that that would feed into better success with my novels. But I just love short stories so much that it just became a pleasure anyway. And then the sort of novels and short stories have just sort of traveled along together since.
Yeah, I know from my own experience, it's a battle to decide where to spend your time between the short stories and a novel. And if you have an agent, they're hammering at you for a novel, but it is really sweet to knock out like a fresh idea, a new story, and get it out and get it published. For me, so it's nice to be able to have the duality, to be able to have both kind of going simultaneously, I would imagine. Yeah,
it takes some discipline. Well, it takes some sort of self-training in the first place to switch between the length, because I've done a few novellas, and sometimes I can't be sure what length something is going to be. Sometimes I think it's going to be a short story and it stretches out. But my general rule is that if I don't have novels on submission to my agent, then I don't work on short fiction unless I'm commissioned. So if I get commissioned for a short story for something, I will always kind of prioritize that, because there's usually a deadline, and obviously it's a bit of an honor to be commissioned for things, and so you always kind of treat those with priority. But otherwise, I'll always keep some ideas on short fiction and stuff like that, and in between novel drafts, I'll work on some short stories, and when a novel gets submitted up to my agent, then I'll work on short stories. And so I'm in a position at the moment where I've got a couple of standalone novels, one that's out with publishers and one that's about to go through, hopefully, a final draft. And I've been doing some short fiction stuff in between. I'll do the final draft of this novel, and then I've got to finish the next Jake Crowley book that I write with David Wood. And then once those are away, I'll go on to short fiction again. And these things overlap. So I'm constantly putting short story ideas in them back. And every once in a while, one will go through and I'll just be like, oh, screw it. I'm just going to do it. And I'll have a short story and then go back to something bigger, especially if I'm in the middle of a novel. Writing the middles or editing the middle of novels is a nightmare. It's hard work. So sometimes I'll have a palate cleansing short story in between.
Yeah, it's hard work and it's monotonous when you're
Can be
reading the same page that you've already read 100 times.
And you've read the same book so many times by this
Right.
point, and you know it needs work, and you've come away from it, and then you come back to it, and it's okay. This is a bit fresh again, and it's good, but it's always just getting right through. And once you get into that last sort of third, and you hit that roller coaster down to the climax, and get excited again. But when you've got 80,000 words or 100,000 words, and you're in the middle of it, it's like being in a valley, and you can't see your way up either side. So it's nice to sort of just exercise your creative brain, and sometimes it's good to do that. You go away, work on something else short, and come back to the big thing, and you have kind of renewed energy for it. But I try not to do that too much. I try to concentrate one thing at a time and sort of reward with the next project along.
Yeah, and I also find, for me personally, when you're writing something, you're also thinking of, when you're not actually physically writing it, you're thinking about it. So it's hard to be writing multiple things at once because your brain is fighting for, the stories are fighting for, room in your imagination.
Yeah, my brain is full of so many things going on at once as it is. I mean, for example, right now, the new novella coming out in the next couple of weeks that's taking up my sort of attention in terms of promo and what's happening, making sure everything's in place for that. I've got a novel that's out on submission. I've got this other novel that I know needs a redraft that I need to do. I'm halfway through Blood Code, the next Jake Crowley novel, plus then the short story ideas are sort of racking up, and I've got one commissioned one. It's got a very long deadline for this commission, so I don't need to sort of put it too far forward. So all this stuff is already kind of in my head and what I'm working on, which is great, good problem to have. But then every time another new idea comes along or something else starts knocking a bit more loudly, it's like, no, I haven't got the space in my brain. So
Right. Have you ever had the experience of writing a short story and maybe one of the novels you have out now is an example of this and I'm not aware of it, but writing a short story and then either publishing it or not publishing it, but then expanding it to novel length, like expanding the concept?
Yeah, well, interestingly, where I said I have a novel, a standalone, it's a sort of standalone urban horror novel that hopefully needs one final draft. There's one story thread within it that's not really quite working right, and I need to try to figure out and straighten that up. It's a bit like sort of, you guys know those British gangster movies, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Lake and stuff like that. It's a bit like that kind of a thing. It's like a London gangster story with supernatural overtones, and these two people in particular who've got these sort of dark talents. So it's like an urban horror. That back in 2013, I think it won the Australian Shadows Award for a short story called Shadows of the Lonely Dead, which has this character who works in palliative care. She's always, helping people when they die in cancer or whatever in this palliative care home. And she has this ability to kind of draw their death and this darkness into her when they go. And then she discovers that she can subsequently do something with that stuff that she takes from them. That's what the short story was. And I always thought that I really enjoyed the character, and it was a good story because it won that award. So it obviously resonated, and I got a lot of good feedback from people about that story. It was originally published in the Suspended in Dusk anthology. And so I kind of figured that there was more I could do with that. That character could work some more. And so this novel that I'm hopefully going to wrap up in the next couple of months is a novel-length work with her and another two main characters of this story. So it's been expanded right up into a novel, and the novel actually looks at it from the guy's point of view, who has a similar talent to hers, only his is far more uncontrolled. And the original story is set in Australia, and she's in Australia and come to London to sort of have a new start, and that's where these two meet each other. So that's an example of a story where a character, effectively the novel is the sequel to the short story. So that happens sometimes,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to be able to mine those ideas, for bigger projects. I was going to ask you, because one of the things that interested me when I started after like I said, the first thing I read was Crowshine, and I was kind of surprised when I went to look up more of your work and picked up Bound and read that because it's so different. And I was wondering if you mind, I don't know how to classify your different types of work. You mentioned the new novel, you mentioned horror, it being sort of in the realm of supernatural horror. And I haven't read Realm Shifter Mage Sign, but I'm assuming those are kind of fantasy. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And then, the Alex Kane series being definitely dark urban fantasy. Do you kind of go where the story leads you as far as which genre you're treading in, or do you have a preferred genre, or is it just kind of the ideas, control how that goes?
Well, I'm a shameless genre masher, really. I think it's what it boils down to. Everything I write, the only sort of overriding thing is everything I write tends to come out pretty dark. So to some degree or another, some straight out horror, but more often than not, I'm mashing fantasy and crime and noir and mystery and horror and everything together. So it's a little hard to categorize sometimes. The Alex Kane series, which is why I tend to say, when people ask, I tend to say I write central thrillers, because it can be very hard. You can say, well, it's a dark urban fantasy thriller. It is. It's like with the Alex Kane series, there's distinct horror tropes throughout the thing. It's very much an urban fantasy. It's very much. My publisher at the time when it first came out started thinking about whether or not they were going to start sort of trying to sell me in the books as grimdark, an urban grimdark, which was an interesting concept. And we quite liked the concept, but then they decided not to sort of not to go in that direction. So it's really hard to sort of pin down what I do, but the short stories tend to be a little bit more literary in a way, a little bit softer, a little calmer on action. The novels tend to be a lot more thriller paced and exciting, and a lot more action, a lot more fighting and stuff like that. Realm Shifter Mage Sign are that dark urban fantasy. The Alex Kane is very much dark urban fantasy, although there's a lot of sort of thriller and horror tropes throughout them both. The new one I was just talking about is sort of urban fantasy, but it's more like an organized crime, gangster story that has some underlying magic and stuff like that to it. The supernatural in that is very much calm. It's just the two main characters have supernatural abilities, whereas in things like the Alex Kane series, there's all different kinds of people with magic and monsters and all sorts of stuff going on. So I'm waffling on because it's very hard to explain really what it is that I do. I tend to just mix and mash everything. The more stuff I can bring into it, then the better,
Right. Yeah.
Can I jump in with a question real quick, Phil?
Sure.
If you don't mind. What sort of a guy is Alex Kane? How would you describe him to a guy like me who has not read that trilogy yet?
Okay, well, the whole trilogy came from the idea of the character of Alex Kane in the first place. It was going to be a standalone novel, and turned out to be a trilogy, and potentially, if it's successful, I might write some more. So that's why the publisher went with Alex Kane series. Because the trilogy wraps up a big storyline, but there's lots of scope for more. Alex Kane, in short, Alex Kane is an underground cage fighter. He's like your UFC or something like that. He's an MMA fighter in that kind of environment. He doesn't like the big lights and the TV and all that, so he fights in underground cage matches around the world, in Sydney and LA and stuff like that, where the money's good and the safety is lighter, and there's no TV and media to brighten it up, because he's just a straight down the line fighter. And he's really good at it because he's trained his ass off. He's a great martial artist, but what he doesn't realize is that he has this slightly magical ability that he draws on without realizing, and he's never really developed it. And he's quite happy. He's ticking along. He's winning fights. He's doing well. And then one day this guy comes along and says, you know what, there's more to you than you realize. And he says, I don't care. I don't want anything to do with it. Subsequently, through it was conspiring around him and people trying to fix fights and him refusing to get involved, he ends up having to leave the country for a while. So he ends up going with this guy after all, and then that just turns his life to shit after that. He gets drawn into all kinds of magic and stuff, and he has to learn very fast about this world he didn't know about. So, and he's the whole series is him desperately trying to get everybody to go away and leave him alone so he can just go back to being a fighter and living the life he enjoyed.
Yeah, he's the ultimate reluctant hero.
Yeah, he wants nothing. Halfway through book 3, like he still wants nothing to do with it.
I was going to ask you about your influences. You mentioned Roald Dahl, who was a big influence of mine as well. And kind of, Roald Dahl wrote, not everybody realizes, but his short stories are intensely dark and weird. Definitely covered, definitely in that weird fiction mold. But what other writers influenced you? What who did you grow up reading? And are there authors living today who you maybe look at as inspirational for some of the work that you do, or inspire you as a writer?
Well, Roald Dahl, as you mentioned, certainly in short fiction, it blew my mind when I was reading his dark and twisted short stories. They're so good. Probably my biggest influence in terms of just wishing I was as good as kind of thing is Clive Barker. I've been a huge Clive Barker fan, and my writing's been influenced by him. The Great and the Secret Show, I think, is one of the greatest novels ever written. There's a lot of contemporary writers are very inspiring to me. People like Nathan Bollingrad and Laird Barron, Karen Warren, Margot Lanigan. There's a lot of people who I think is doing fantastic work. Who it's always, and when they're still around and still work, you always feel like you've got to work harder to try somehow to keep up with them. And then, historically, very much affected by the work of Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft and Robert Bloch and people like that. Have always, I've always been sort of blown away by the twisted and the weirdness. And a lot of my stuff, I've never actually written Cthulhu Mythos itself, but I do play a lot with the cosmic horror kind of tropes, and I love those. The story in fantasy and science fiction is a straight up cosmic horror historical sort of pirate story. And I don't want to write in Lovecraft's universe, particularly with his characters or stuff like that, but I love those kind of ideas, and that sort of humans as specks in the universe and creatures and gods and things we can imagine, that feeds through a lot of what I do. So historically, that's very much a big influence.
Yeah, I mean, in Bound, there was definitely an element of an otherworldly, without giving anything away, an otherworldly presence
right,
that he had to sort of figure out how to beat in order to win the day. And I thought it made me feel, not so much Lovecraft, but definitely made it, put it into that ballpark of Lovecraftian cosmic horror for sure. Like, yeah, and it was, and I, for those listening, I really recommend buying the first Alex Kane book, Bound. It's a lot of, as well as Crowshine, but it's a lot of fun. I burned through it. I was it's been a long time, really, since I have had that. I read a lot, but it's been a long time since I've had that, leaving the light on and looking at the clock and seeing that it's 2 a.m. when I was supposed to be in bed, asleep by 11 or whatever, because I couldn't put a book down. And I thought Bound was very much that way.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it's the best compliment you can get. It's like with novels, not all, but an important thing to me with novels is that they are like that. I'm very influenced by movies and graphic novels and stuff like that, and I like that constant sort of pace. Sometimes there's a bit of space in a novel and a bit of room, but I love that page-turning quality. The best version of that we have a big thing over here called Supernova, which is a little bit like San Diego Comic-Con. Is that kind of a sort of vibe, that kind of an event with cosplayers and all the big pop culture and that sort of stuff. And it runs over 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday and Sunday are the 2 big days. And I had someone come up and buy a copy of Bound off me, because I've been an author guest there a few times. I always have this sort of row where 4 or 5, 6 authors are invited guests, and you get to hang out and meet people and sign books. And I had someone come up and buy a copy, and the next day she came back and she was looking really tired and red-eyed, and she's like, "Oh, you bastard! I've been up all night and I finished it." And she bought Obsidian the next, and she bought Introduction the next day. So, and that's the best compliment you can possibly have. It just feels so good to think, wow, somebody was that into it. That there's no compliment, no review or 5 stars or anything can compare with something like that. Someone who was just drawn in and held like that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of fun. And I was going to ask you, and it's got a lot of adult themes and a lot of adult situations, we'll say. It's, It has its moments. And
Yeah.
I was going to ask if, having not read the other duology, I was going to ask if that was that also, is it also for geared toward adults, or is it YA border or line, or how would you describe the other series?
Well, all the novels, well, the Balanced duology and the Alan trilogy in particular, they are definitely adult novels. They're certainly not written for YA. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of swearing. There's some really dark stuff in places. There's one scene in particular in Bound that I didn't know if the publisher was going to let me keep in, and I was really pleased when they did, because I had no idea how I was going to fix that part of the storyline with a different scene. But equally, I've been really surprised by the number of younger people that have been really into it. I've had twice now, I've been invited into high schools to talk to their year 8 class about fantasy. So like they do an English unit, part of their English unit one term will be fantasy. And twice now I've been invited in, and you're like 13, 14-year-olds. And I was like, you've read the books, right? You know who you're talking about. There's not a lot of sex on the page, but there's a lot of sex that happens off the page. There's a lot of violence on the page. There's, these people are cage fighters and monsters and whatever.
There's some sex on the page.
There's a little sex on the page, yeah. And there's no censorship of language. The editor actually sent me a thing when they were going through book. I don't know, what's your language rating on this show?
X.
Okay, so she sent me.
Mike can unmute his mic fast enough.
It depends on who's on the show. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, I assume so. I'm doing my best because I'm like my book.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I don't censor. But yeah, so the editor that was going through the Alex Coyne trilogy, she sent me this document, and she was like, oh, in Bound there's 200 examples of the word fuck. In Obsidian it's 280, and now in Abduction, third book of the trilogy, it's up to like 363. It's not really a problem, but are you sure the way you want it to be? And I was like, well, they're a lot more fucked up in book 3 than they are in book 1, so let's just leave it as it is. So
you could have just said fucking A. That's right.
Yeah, that's it. And so it's like I don't try to sort of censor that stuff or bring it back with dialogue in particular. And all that stuff is in dialogue. Obviously, it's not in narrative. It's in characters talking to each other. But that's how characters like that would talk to each other. And there are other characters who just wouldn't. There are other characters who wouldn't swear, and so those characters don't. That with the violence and the swearing and everything else, schools are keen to have me come in. And I think one of the schools that had me in was a boys' school, and I think one of the reasons that they like that is because Alex Coyne is a fighter, and there's loads of martial arts action in the books, and that really keeps the kids' interests. But a lot of what goes on through that trilogy are these continual moral challenges that he gets, and he has to do some pretty unpleasant things in order to sort of move forward. And Coyne is questioning his actions all the way through, and questioning the things that he has to do and doesn't want to do or whatever. So I think that the teachers kind of like that. Fundamentally it's a hero's journey, but a very reluctant one.
Yeah.
And so I think they kind of like that use,
Yeah, I would assume it's fairly easy for you to write the fight scenes, because I read that you're a kung fu instructor, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Like I said, the Alex Coyne trilogy was born out of the character initially of Alex Coyne, and I had a few different ideas knocking around in my head. And I had this idea where I wanted to take what's fundamentally like the big fat fantasy trope, where the little group have to go around to get things while avoiding the bad guy, and if they don't get these things together in time, it could be the end of the world and all that. That kind of framework of a fantasy story. I wanted to write that in the modern world, paced like a thriller, and I needed kind of a vehicle to do that. And then when the character of Alex Coyne sort of came into my head, I was like, oh, okay, so this character and this kind of plot, this can all come together, and here's the book I'm looking for. And the reason I started thinking about Alex Coyne as a character is because for many years people kept telling me what great fight scenes I wrote. There's a lot in Realm Shift and Mage Sign too. A friend of mine had me run a workshop at a convention years and years ago, probably 10 years ago. And she said, can you run a workshop on writing good fight scenes? And the truth is, a lot of people, most people don't fight. They they can research it, but a lot of people tend to write fight scenes a bit like movie fight scenes. And movie fights look good on a screen, but they're very unrealistic, you know, this sort of two-dimensional, turn-based kind of fighting. Whereas when we're writing inside characters' heads, we can make fights a lot more realistic. We can be in their head, emotions and sound, and as well as smell and touch and all that sort of stuff. So she asked me if I could run a workshop on doing that, which I did, and subsequently that was popular. I did that workshop a bunch of times. I ended up doing that workshop with 200 people at a Worldcon. And then I subsequently wrote this very short sort of ebook. It's like an extended essay, really, which is kind of like a written version of that workshop, just listing and detailing all these ideas people can use to make their fight scenes more realistic. And so as all this was going along, it got to a point where I thought to myself, well, I should probably, instead of just having fights in my books and some characters who can fight or whatever, I should probably write a book about a character who is first and foremost a fighter. It's someone who actually has that martial artist mindset, which was great because it meant I got to play with all those sort of, because martial arts obviously is a lot more than fighting. It's, you know, there's the self-expression and the self-development and all that sort of stuff that's involved in fighting. And so it's like, well, if I write a character who is first and foremost a martial artist, and in the case of Alex Coyne, I just sort of brought him up to date and made him a professional MMA fighter. It meant I could play those tropes and those ideas and really focus as a martial artist, and then put them in this bigger, fantastical, dark, weird kind of environment as it went on. So that's sort of where it grew from, and it meant that I could also, throughout the books, Alex is struggling with what's going on, and he constantly remembers the lessons from his teacher, and, you know, realizing that his martial arts lessons were much bigger and they apply to other things, and they kind of apply to all of life, and you get to play with martial philosophies in the fight of life and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was kind of exciting. So that's where Alex Coyne grew from. So I got to really sort of stretch my martial artist muscles there. And people always ask, is Alex Coyne you? And he's not. So not me, but he does have a very similar martial philosophy to myself.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the more interesting facets of the book, was that he used his martial arts training. And I say his training, I mean, he does use his physical training, but he uses the mental exercises that martial artists utilize in order to kind of control his new powers. And I thought that was really, I always thought that was, every time that would pop up in the book, I found it fascinating. Yeah, you're able to dovetail those two things.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, the only way that, particularly through the first book, but, you know, throughout the series to some degree, the only way that he manages to survive longer than anyone else that's been in his predicament and have a chance against what's happening is twofold. One is he gets befriended by the character of Silhouette, who's spoiled too much, but she's a very powerful character, as it turns out, and she decides to step up and help because she sees an opportunity for herself in helping him. So the only things that really keep him alive in the, you know, throughout the, at least the first part of the story, is her assistance and his martial training, as you say, physically, but as well as physically, mentally, and everything else. And those are the things that sort of carry him through. So yeah, it was good fun to be able to really draw on those things and put them in such a weird and fantastical environment.
So I want to switch gears for a second, and I wanted to ask you about, I'm very curious, I wanted to ask you about the books that you've written with David Wood. I know you have a new series that I think there's the Jake Crowley series you mentioned. There's a second book that you're in the process of writing. The first book is out. And there's been like there's been a novella, and then you just recently came out with was it a novel, Primordial? Yeah.
Yeah, David Wood and I have known each other for a long time. David Wood runs Griffinwood Press, who picked up Realm Shift and Mage Sign back in the day. And that's how we got to know each other. And he's a very good writer in his own right. He's an action-adventure writer. He writes the Dane Maddox series, which is incredibly popular. And talked about collaborating a little bit, I mean, partly from a commercial decision, as well as just for the creative doing it. Because, you know, when you get collaborations, you potentially draw each other's audiences across, you give people new authors to discover that way, and, you know, people might... And so initially we tried a collaboration on a novella called Dark Right, and the idea with that, we're basically just writing a Hammer House of Horror B-movie kind of horror story that we collaborated on and set in the Appalachian Mountains. And that was okay. That did all right. And then David said, you know, maybe what we should actually do is do more in, because he's very much an action adventure, sort of Indiana Jones, Wilbur Smith, kind of that kind of novelist. His Dane Maddock books are very much those men's adventure, action adventure kind of genre. And he said maybe we should do something a little bit more like that, but try to draw in a bigger audience and, you know, mix in a little bit of the weird stuff that I do. So the next thing we wrote was the first of the Jake Crowley novels, which has got ex-SAS soldier who's now a teacher, and he teamed with a woman called Rose Black, who's a museum creator and researcher, and they end up getting drawn into this thing. And it's, you know, it's the crazy kind of Dan Brown thriller style thing where there's MacGuffins and they're running around to secret societies and secret rooms and find these weird objects and all that sort of stuff. And those books, because of David's audience as much as anything else, so the hardest thing for me to write with those books is there is no swearing in them. It's incredible. I really have to go through the dialogue after I've finished the first draft and trim it all out, because when I'm writing and just in the flow of things, people tend to talk a bit more naturally. They're not formulaic, but certain things that audience sort of expects from their books, and that's one of those things. So that's the Jake Crowley novels. And I'm working on the second one. We're about halfway through writing the second one now. And then the book that just came out from Cohesion Press in January is a book called Primordial, and that's a bit more influence in that. The language is a little bit more like you'd expect from one of my books. There's a bit more horror. It's basically a creature feature with this great big aquatic kind of dinosaur creature. There's a crazy billionaire who's heard rumors of this monster in this Finnish lake. He gets the help of a guy called Sam Aston, who's an Australian marine biologist with big debts to the mob that he kind of needs to pay off. And the billionaire says, come and help me with this and I'll give you a handsome payday. And they go off to sea, and the marine biologist is like, well, you know, this is bullshit. Of course there's no giant monster in this Finnish lake, but you know, it's a monster novel, so of course there is. That's right. And if there may be more Sam Aston books if this one does well, we don't know, but Primordial was sort of is a standalone on its own at this stage. And it's sold quite well. It's been quite popular. It's gratifying. It's so nice to see a book get picked up and, you know, get enjoyed like that.
And the short stories, as of the time of the bio that's on your website, I think you had listed that you had written just over 70, and you have the one collection. I've also noticed that you do. Maybe you could talk about this as well. I noticed that you do. And you list a lot of podcasts, which is something that I just started getting into. I just sold one to Tales to Terrify, a story. So I'm just kind of, and I don't know anything about it, but I'd be curious to get your take on the podcast, how that works for you as a writer. And also, is there another collection being, honed, ready to release? Because I know you have a wide amount of stories to work from.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I've had 70-something, I think, short stories published at the moment. Might be coming towards 80 now, because there's a couple of things that haven't come out yet, so I'd have to count up again to know for sure. With Crowshine, the collection, that was very much sort of the cream of my dark fantasy and horror stories to date. I do write a handful of science fiction stories as well, not nearly so many, but I do play in field sometimes. At some point, and a number of my short stories, science fiction stories, are in the same universe. There's a little bit of overlap with them. So I'm kind of really casually, over a process of many years, sort of putting together almost like this mosaic novel. And so at some point, I might look towards getting a science fiction short story collection put together. And I would like to certainly have another short story collection maybe in another year or two. There's already, because as you guys know, publishing is a sort of slow process. So by the time a book out, it was something you were working on probably a year, 6 months ago, and other things happen in the meantime. So I've probably got enough good new work for another collection, or will have within the next year or two. So I certainly would like to see more collections. I love short fiction, and I love the fact that I have a short story collection out there, because that was always a career high point for me. With the collected fiction of kind of thing has always been stuff that I found so enjoyable. So it's great to have one. It'd be good to have more. But with the podcasts, it's a way to get paid again, and it's a way to reach new readers, because I've had several of my stories have been through Tales to Terrify, one at Pseudopod and places like that. A lot of podcasts will take reprints. So you get originally published in a magazine or in an anthology, and then once your rights return to you after 6 months, 12 months, whatever the contract is, then you can submit these things to podcast, and a lot of them will then pay you again a story with the right to do the English language audio. Again, for the same story, which from a career point of view, of course, it helps, because none of us make very much money writing. So the more often we can get paid for the same thing, the better. And then when it goes out to a podcast audience, there's often a lot of people listening to those podcasts that wouldn't read the Anthol magazines the stories come out in the first place. So you get to reach a bit more of an audience that way, and then obviously you hope it feeds back. And if someone really enjoys a podcast of your story, they might go, oh, what else has this guy done? And they'll look for your books or look for other podcasts and think of that. So I've always got a list of where rights return to me from certain stories, and when rights return, I tend to then go through and push that stuff out towards podcasts and see if any of those reprint podcasts are keen to pick it up and republish it. And again, with collection, then potentially you get paid for the same story again that way. That's the beauty of short fiction. It's a bit like a snowball. The more short stories you have out there, the more momentum you get in terms of reprints and commissions and collections or whatever. So building it's not a short con. It's a long game.
Yeah, I made that. I had that realization when the story that I sold to Tales to Terrify, I'd originally sold to Dark Discoveries magazine, which is coming out next month, and it was kind of neat. It's such a funny moment when you're like, oh wow, I can get paid multiple times for the same story. This is great.
Yeah.
So
my record is 5 times for the same story. I've had one story I've been paid for 5 times, and the 4 subsequents were all higher than the initial payment I got for the original publication. So that's my record at this stage. And
what about audio books? I didn't research this before speaking with you, so maybe you could tell us. Are any of the current books or the collection geared up for an audiobook release?
Realm Shift and Mage Sign are available in audiobook. Dark Rite is, I think, will soon be. That's the first Jake Crowell. Thus far, the collection and the Alex Kane series aren't, but I know my publisher and my publishers and agent are looking into those things. They're always on the lookout for potential opportunities there. So they could be, at the moment, as far as I know, off the top of my head, at the moment, Realm Shift, Mage Sign, and Dark Rite are the only ones that are out at the moment. I think Primordial will be soon if it's not. I think because David Wood has a relationship going with a couple of good readers. His entire Dane Maddock back catalogue is all available as audiobook as well, and so I think he's talking to someone about the possibilities of doing Primordial. So that might come up soon too. And there's a page on my website of podcasts where I think maybe a dozen or so of my stories that have been podcast. So you can find those in audio, even though Crowshine itself isn't. Some of those stories are also in Crowshine.
And do you want to plug your website real quick? Where do you prefer people to go?
Well, I had a nightmare last year with the idiot hackers that made a mess of my site, and I had to move hosts and basically rebuild everything. So it's all finally back up. You can just look for warriorscribe.com, one word, and that'll send you to my site, and you can look around from there.
Warrior
a while
Scribe.
ago. Yeah, someone at a con a while ago, a good friend of mine, she's an editor, and her husband, and when he introduced to me, he was like, this, that, and the other, and Alan's a writer, and blah, blah, blah. And then it came up that I ran a martial arts school as well as my day job. And he said, oh, you're the Warrior Scribe. And so, so it kind of stuck. I kind of like the idea, so it stuck. So my website, that's the easy way. I won't go into the complicated details, but yes, warriorscribe.com, that'll send you there.
And what do you have? You mentioned the 2 novels. You have the one novel that's being shopped and one novel that sounds like it's being processed for release. And then I saw a book, PS Publishing is putting something out, or it's ready to put out?
Yeah, that's quite exciting. I love working with PS Publishing. They're such a great
Yeah,
UK publisher.
They're a great press.
Yeah, they do so much good stuff. And a guy over here called Jack Dan, you guys probably have come across. He's American, now Australian. He wrote the Memory Cathedral and stuff like that. He's been around just like forever. He's such a great guy and a fantastic editor. And he recently put together an anthology called Dreaming in the Dark that PS Publishing published, which is well worth checking out. I've got a story in that, which was one of the stories that was nominated for the Aurealis Award last month. And he then subsequently just became sort of the Australian acquisitions editor for PS Publishing. So they've got a PS Australia branch now, which Jack Dan looks after. And he bought this novella from me. So that's coming out from PS Publishing, I think, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think it's due out any time now. They're doing, because they do those beautiful hardcover editions. There's going to be 100 signed and numbered limited hardcover. There's going to be a regular unsigned hardcover and an ebook, and they'll all be released at the same time, which I think is, I'm a bit out of touch because I've just come back from SwanCon and I've sort of got to catch up with mail and stuff like that. But I think it's due out around 2 or 3 weeks from now, and that's again playing in Cosmic Horror Sandbox. It's a bit like, well, when I was trying to describe it to people, I don't know if you guys know the Gillian Flynn novel Gone Girl. And I was saying it's a bit like Gone Girl with cosmic horror. So that's what coming out. It's like a 30,000 word novella coming out with those guys with PS Publishing. So I'm quite excited about that. The cover's fantastic. They commissioned original artwork from Ben Baldwin for the cover, and it just looks fantastic. But it's not on my website yet because of this big hack, and I've been away. Over the next week or two, I need to update the site and get all that stuff on there. But just have a look on my Facebook page or whatever, and you'll get all the details for those sorts of things.
Yeah, just add that to your list of things to do.
Yeah, I've got I got really
a martial arts club and writing novels and
and looking after a 3-year-old and I got really sick a few weeks ago. And
I saw those posts on Facebook. You look terrible.
Oh my God! I had the local paper were coming around to do a feature article, and they came on this amazing. So they sent this photographer around. So I'm standing posing with books and standing there with big weapons because they were keen on the martial arts stuff. And then they were like, "Oh, you ride a motorcycle? Can you ride your bike up and down the road, and we'll get a shot of you on the bike?" So I spent all morning doing that, and then I had to sit down. That was with the photographer, and I sat down with the guy and did this sort of 30-40 minute interview chatting, and the whole time I'm talking to him, he was just kind of swimming left and right in my vision. And then I just face planted in bed after they went, and then from then I was like really sick for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I had to go to SwanCon. I was a guest of honor at SwanCon in Perth, and I've just got back from there. So I'm so far behind on everything, but it's kind of good because I've got all sorts of things to catch up on, but I'm finally in a place now where I can get on with things and get back to writing and get the website tidied up and all that stuff.
That sounds great. And I was going to ask you, it seems to me, and with Smash Dragons and some of the other reviewers that I personally know, and
coming for you, Philip.
Yeah, welcome to Los Angeles.
Yeah,
it goes every 5 minutes. At least not a helicopter looking for an escaped criminal. That's usually what we hear. But I was going to ask you, the Australian horror scene seems alive and well. And I was going to ask you to throw a few names of if people want to kind of read some Australian-based writers that you would, recommend. Who are some names that readers can go out and pick up their books that you would throw out there?
Man, it really is. There's a real renaissance. I think there's a renaissance in dark fiction in general at the moment. It could be a lot to do with what's going on in the world. It's hard to pin down what drives these things. But Australia does hit above its weight when it comes to having some writers. And I'm going to forget people now, and this will be terrible. But there's some really good people. We've got a lot of fantastic women writing really good dark fiction. Karen Warren, Lisa Hannett, and later Margot Lanigan. Those are all people absolutely should check out. Robert Hood is sort of a grandmaster of horror. He's written more than 100 short stories, and he's got a couple of really good novels out there. There's I'm on the spot now trying to remember the name.
Angela Slater,
Yeah, she's pronounced Angela Slater, but it's got 2 T's in it. So it's so people always say Slater.
Us Americans don't know how to say anything right.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, her name is Slater. But she's amazing. She's a very good friend of mine. But she was up for the best collection for the Aurealis Award, the same as I was with Crowshine, and she won. So
Yeah.
It's a good test of friendship by how much you like someone when you don't mind that they won an award that you really wanted, and it's like, well,
I retract my mention of her work.
Yeah, no, I genuinely am happy for her to win. She's an amazing writer. She really is.
Yeah, she's very good.
She really is
talented.
Yeah, she's such a lovely person. She's been fantastic help to me. We sort of beta read for each other and stuff like that these days, so that's good. Other writers, Amanda Spedding is a good horror writer. Lee Murray, New Zealander, but we count them for us as well. She's a great writer in Australia. Joanne Anderton is someone you absolutely should check out, especially her Veiled Worlds novels. She writes this amazing sort of dark science fantasy stuff. She's definitely someone to check out. Maria Lewis has been writing werewolf novels and really going places with those. Joseph Ashley Smith is another guy who's sort of just starting to come into his own recently. He's sort of one of the young Turks coming up, and he's writing some really good stuff just lately. There's so many, man. I could keep going on with names.
I know. Is it Karen Warren? Is that how you pronounce her name?
Yeah, Karen, Kaaron. She changed her name, and she's a good friend of mine. She's an absolutely wonderful person. I think that she could possibly write the stuff that she does when you meet her, because she's so lovely and writes the most stuff. It's amazing. She's so good. But when she was in school, there was like 3 or 4 different Karens in the class. So she changed her spelling to Kaaron just to be different, and then it stuck. Her name is spelled that way, Karen Warren, but she recently, last year, she put out a novel. She just won the Aurealis Award for it. She already won the Shadows Award for it, and she's up for the Ditmar as well. It's a novel called The Grief Hole that's just come out, and it came out at the end of last year, obviously. And it's amazing. It's a horror novel, but it's not like anything you'll have read before. It really is incredible achievement. It blew. I read it as soon as I read it. I finished it. Right when it came out, I rang her up and I went, "This is crazy. This is going to sweep awards. This book is amazing." And she was like, "Oh, don't be." And now she's already got the Shadows and the Aurealis, and she'll be up for the Ditmar in June.
Yeah, I've heard really, really good things about The Grief Hole. I think it was Laird Barron who told me about it. Yeah, Laird Barron, I think, had read it and said it was amazing.
I'll tell Karen that Laird Barron's read it in that case, because she'll be so pleased about that.
I'm pretty sure it's he who told me all about it, but I think he posted about it. But yeah, I'm excited to read that. I've heard really great things. And then the only, I guess, last question for me is I wanted to ask you if anything, speaking of repurposing content, are there any buzzings or whispers going around about any of your stories being translated to different mediums such as film or television?
Oh, I would love that.
I can see it very easily based on what I've read.
But this is it. Yeah, people tell me this all the time. Every time people come and talk to me, they're like, "Oh man, the Alex Kane novels would make such great movies, or would make such a great HBO show." And it's like, well, go tell a producer, because yeah, it would be amazing. I get it all the time, especially for the novel stuff, because it is. I am so influenced by movies. I do write in a very sort of visual style, and I would love to see adaptations of my work. There's nothing. A film student made a short of one of my short stories a long time ago, but I haven't had any nibbles or yeah. I know my agent is always looking to sell subsidiary rights, so with any luck, something will happen one day. But yeah, from your mouth to producer's ears, because it would be amazing.
And I know, well, with the Kane trilogy hitting the U.S., the remaining 2 books hitting the U.S. later in the year, hopefully that'll lead to more attention here in the U.S. and Hollywood.
Yeah, that's what I'm really hoping. I'm hoping that once the whole trilogy is out there, like I said, Obsidian and Abduction actually come out together in July with Ragnarok, and there has been a couple of other things. I can't really go into details, but I have been involved with some other projects where other stories in anthologies have been looked at by filmmakers and stuff like that. And so I know that I'm sort of in that position where some people are beginning to notice stuff, and I know that my work has been read by some people that are sort of connected with film production and stuff like that. So, you know, this business, who knows, anything can happen. But as you said, hopefully once the whole trilogy, the Coyne trilogy, comes out in the US, that it'll get a bit more popular and maybe raise a bit more. So that's my hope anyway. Once all three are out, you know, it's always that case of having more books readers. So.
You're right. Yeah, that's what people keep telling me is the best way to promote your books is to write more books.
Yeah, that's the only thing you can control as well. So it's the only thing you've got any sort of mastery. You just keep writing and hope for the best. So yeah.
Mike, I don't have any further questions. Do you have anything else, or anything guys have anything else?
I just have one question for Alan before we let him go. You just said a couple of minutes ago that you're hugely influenced by movies. Can you name a few of the movies that have influenced your writing?
Oh man, so many.
Some of your favorites.
My favorite movie of all time is Blade Runner. Even though I don't really tend to write a lot in sort of near future sci-fi, I do write some. But I just love the noir and sort of detective aspect to Blade Runner. I think it's just a pinnacle of movie making. I'm a huge fan of The Crow, the original Crow with Brandon Lee. Dark City is another movie that I've loved. The original
great movie.
Yeah, I'm really into those kind of things where really interesting ideas get but then like my reading, I've got a really broad taste. I love reading and watching westerns, and just sort of thrillers and detectives and crime and that kind of. So, yeah, the most recent movie I just watched that I really enjoyed was Bone Tomahawk. I just recently got around to seeing that, which is kind of like a horror western, and that was amazing. That was mind-blowing movie. I had no idea what to expect of that, other than it was a horror western. And
I've heard that too. It sounds like I should check that out.
It's an incredibly paced movie. It's very, it's got space. The dialogue is brilliant. Like it's a masterclass in dialogue alone. That movie.
Yeah, it was written by, and I met Alan and I briefly discussed this on Facebook. But it was written by Craig. I think it's pronounced Zahler, Zahler, who wrote and directed Bone Tomahawk, and he's written a couple of books that are really highly regarded. They're kind of dark westerns. One of his books was optioned by Ridley Scott, so he's definitely in that world of cinematic dark western. Or you'd like Bone Tomahawk very much, Mike. I recommend it.
Okay, I'll rent it.
Don't watch it with your kid, though.
No, it's a really dark movie.
Very dark.
Well, thanks, Alan, for being on the show. It's great to talk with you and to have you on.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's good to chat.
Thank you, Alan.
Again, Alan's website is warriorscribe.com, and there's a list of Alan's books there. You can click right over to wherever, Amazon or wherever, and purchase them, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of links that are there. That's it. And if you look along the header of my website, you'll see the menu items, but there's also a few social media links. You'll find Twitter and Facebook and my Amazon page and Instagram. So any issues that you have, or anybody wants to talk to me about books or about anything else, just hit up. I'm always knocking around Twitter and Facebook and stuff. I'm happy to chat. So if there's any problems, sometimes with the small press stuff, if you're keen, it can be hard to find. So yeah, just hit up social media. I'm always around.
And I would strongly suggest to the viewers and listeners to pick up Crowshine, which is the collection, and the first of the Alex Coyne novels. You can't go wrong with either one. They're incredibly strong and entertaining.
Yeah, what a great title, by the way. That's actually what I downloaded the sample from Kindle, and that's what snagged me was the title, Crowshine.
Oh, with Crowshine? Yeah. That's a story I'd been wanting to write for a long time. That I finally kind of got my ideas around what I wanted to do with it. And yeah, the Crow and the Moonshine were these things that had been knocking in my head for a while, and I finally got around to writing the story, and then it ended up being the focus of the collection, which is kind of cool. So
Well, thanks, Alan. Appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, thanks for getting up early.
No worries. Yeah, I'll go and have another coffee. Thanks very much.
It's about, what, 9 a.m. on Monday, where you're at, right?
Yeah, just after 9. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, Monday morning, the week begins.
All right. Well, thanks. All you have to do is close your browser and I'll kick you out. So.
Okay. No worries. Thanks very much for
Thanks a
having
lot,
me.
Alan. Appreciate it.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
See you now.
Well, thanks, Phil.
Seems like a very interesting guy.
He does, doesn't he? Here's his Twitter profile. Author of supernatural thrillers and urban horror, kung fu instructor, personal trainer, motorcyclist, dog lover, gamer, and heavy metal fan.
Okay, you can't have people on who are that interesting, Mike. I mean,
it makes us look bad, I know.
put some dullard on next time, like, you know, me.
I have no motorcycle and one cat. That's just not,
That we shine a little brighter, yeah.
not very exciting.
And very nice guy, though. Seems like a very nice guy.
Yeah, I've been Facebook friends with him for a while. We've had some chats, and that's why I thought about bringing him on. But I read Crowshine. I didn't really know much more about him, and then I started getting into his other stuff, and I saw his success with his other stories and all his other books he has going on. I was like, oh man, this guy, we should get him on because he sounds fascinating. And he's a super nice dude.
Sorry to interrupt. Benjamin Handelman is watching live, and he says that Bone Tomahawk is on Amazon Prime. So for everybody who has the Amazonian Netflix, you can watch it for free. So, which I do because I just binged watch Bosch season 3 with my wife this weekend. So all 10 episodes.
Now, I was debating Bosch. I have not watched any Bosch. I've read.
Oh man! Well, do you like noir?
I've read a couple of books.
Do you like noir?
Yeah,
it's done very well.
I like anything that's good. I mean, if it's done well,
you gotta watch it, man. Seriously.
I'll check out season 1.
So you have 30 episodes to watch now.
3 seasons.
So, 3 seasons.
They're all day.
30 episodes.
I'll binge them.
Yeah, there you go. Forgot to mention prizes at the beginning of the show, but that's okay. Matt, you got something?
Yeah, this
cool.
is different. I was going through some boxes I haven't seen in a while, and I got a shirt. It's kind of like, it's a men's extra large. It's sort of like a bowling shirt. It's not a t-shirt. But you see on the front, it's got this Egyptian-esque logo. It's got
the king in yellow type thing.
Back. And I think it was a king in yellow type giveaway. It might have been from Kickstarter. I've never worn it. It's kind of wrinkled from being in the box, but it's never been worn or laundered or anything. So it's just different. We're going to give away a shirt this week.
All right, brand new king and yellowish type of shirt. So.
I have no idea where it came from. I've completely forgotten. It's from last week. I'd forget.
It looks like the Egyptian version of the yellow sign.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I think it's more the yellow sign than the king in yellow. Looks
Okay.
like this.
All right, I want to mention that The Gods of H.P. Lovecraft, recent Lovecraftian anthology, and a very good one, is only 99 cents on Kindle this weekend only. So I think it's this weekend only. Maybe if you're listening on Monday or Tuesday, check Amazon, see if it's still 99 cents. I don't know. But if you're watching live or you're listening Monday, maybe see if it still is. I checked before the show and it was still 99 cents. So that's a pretty good price for that thick book.
Interestingly about that book.
Yes.
There's the Lovecraft sort of read going on at Tor.
Yeah.
And I think that they've in some ways been reluctant to explore a lot of modern anthologies for some reason, except like a lot of the books they have are from the stories they review are from like the 30s. Lovecraft's contemporaries or his immediate people who followed in his wake. But this particular book, The Gods of H.P. Lovecraft, they've gone over 3, 4, 5 of these stories.
Yeah, I noticed that. What do you think of that column, Matt?
Well, on the one hand, I wax excessively verbose. Okay, it's very hard to get into a discussion of all of Lovecraft's stories online, like essentially a Lovecraftian book club. In the early 90s, on alt.horror.cthulhu, there was a read, and there were quite a few top Lovecraftian scholars of the time who participated. Now, I missed that, okay? Then you fast forward to 2007, 8, 9. Was it? Gosh, I'm going to get the name wrong. Who's the guy from Chicago, does video games? Ken Hite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a real intellectual, and he's a very funny guy.
Yeah.
He wrote a description of his favorite Lovecraftian stories, or a critique, on his webpage or his blog or whatever it was, and there was a big discussion that went on with it, and he subsequently reproduced that in a book called Tour to Lovecraft.
Right, I remember that.
Took those columns and incorporated some of the discussion, and it's a very entertaining book. It doesn't have the stories, it's just a discussion of the stories. Okay, so the next time we tried to do that on alt.horror.cthulhu was a few years later, and it just tanked. Nobody, like, we didn't get past like the first book, first story, and so on the one hand, I think this performs a valuable service in that, like, if you're interested in Lovecraft and you want to participate in a discussion, particularly a few years ago when they were first starting, they went over all of Lovecraft's stories, and they went their perspective on it, and they were open discussions, so you could put your thoughts also. On the other hand, I don't have, they've not wowed me with their analysis. For example, part of the idea is, you know, it's like you can't talk about Lovecraft without critiquing him at the same time now. Saying, oh, he was really a misogynist, oh, he was really a racist, oh, he really was xenophobic, oh, he was scared of women. He was
sort of like a disclaimer every time you mention his name.
Every time you got to make a disclaimer. And so part of the rationale behind this wasn't just let's enjoy these stories. It was let's have a modern answer to these stories and analyze them from the perspective of modern women authors in working in Lovecraft's sandbox. So I find that to be a rather tedious, heavy-handed approach. But that's just me. You know, some people are clearly thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm still following it because they are going back and forth now with, like, people who wrote stories that may have influenced Lovecraft, people who were in his immediate circle after he died, and then modern stories like ones from the gods of H.P. Lovecraft. So it's still a very good way to get involved. You can go onto the tour. I link it to every week. I link the discussion. You're free to go over there and click on it and participate in the discussion in the comments section. They're getting no more than, say, 8 or 10 comments per story now. So, but it's wide open if that's what you want to do, and it's the only modern thing like that that's currently available. So I think they're performing a valuable service, even if I'm not particularly thrilled with their analysis. Sometimes I get challenged. Sometimes their insights. They bring up stories that I may have intended to read but forgot to read, and it's also a way for people new to the mythos to get involved in a big discussion group like this. There's nothing else like it going on right now.
All right. Well, that's a good analysis. All right. Saw the trailer for The Mist. What do we think? The new Mist TV series.
Well, okay. You have to understand that this is not going to be the story, you know, the short story brought to the screen. It's going to be the world of the short story as imagined by the producers of this new series. And in that respect, who knows? Maybe they'll go off on tangents and whatever. but they have to have a lot more. They have a lot more characters to play with. You know, both expendable and those that
Yeah.
come in every week. But it's like I'm sure they're doing it to.
You gotta have some red shirts, man.
Right, but it's also like
That's
how
A
long?
lot of red shirts.
How long can you sustain a series that's stuck in a grocery store?
Well, I look at it as
Maybe they're
I look
not.
at it as sort of Walking Dead, which is that this thing is taking over the world, and there's a band of survivors who have to get from place to place and save who they can, and there'll be, you know, those who cannot be saved, and I just don't know how the. I mean, is it a series, or is it, or I can't, I just, or is it like is it a one season kind of thing, or is it?
I wasn't sure if it
limited
was
series?
a series or if it was a mini series.
I think it's one of those things where if they get, like, they'll probably have 8 or 10 or 13 episodes, and then if they get a bite, enough viewership, they'll probably continue on with it. I mean, isn't that the way of it? That if you get enough interest, you'll get season 2.
Well, I mean, like True Detective, that arc, you know, when you write for television, you're writing it a certain way. You're either writing it as a one season arc, or you're writing it as one season arcs with potentially series arcs. So if it's written to be one limited series, like a mini series, like an 8-part series, like True Detective, or American Horror Story, where each season's a totally different, you know, storyline with different characters and everything. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if it's supposed to just be 8 episodes or whatever, or if it's going to be, I don't know how long you can pull something like that off for.
Well,
The Mist tagline is going to be "Today the town, tomorrow the world." That would be season 2.
well,
Yeah, it's a lot of minutes.
Yeah, Rick, what?
yeah. The other thing, I think, if you were going to make a multiple season series out of The Mist, you might have to explain who these creatures are in greater detail, or maybe have humans cross over to the world of The Mist.
Well, I'm kind of hoping it goes Lovecraftian. So,
Well,
Let's
I
see.
think that's a definite.
you think it's a definite?
Well, the question is, will it be Lovecraftian or full-blown mythos?
Well, the thing is, they could do it any number of ways. Remember, didn't this happen on some kind of, quote, army base or military base?
Yes.
They
Yeah.
could turn it into a military battling the mist monsters thing as easily as go the way that you may want, which would be more cosmic horror. You know, it depends on what.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I thought the movie was too long, so I don't know if I can watch 8 to 10 episodes of people running around in smoke, getting attacked.
You know,
by creatures.
I watched the trailer and I'll tell you, I just did not get that excited about it.
Well,
maybe it's going to be a lot better than what, you know.
How many times can you see
trailer
somebody pulled into the smoke? How many times can you see a
Right.
weird flappy octopus arm coming out of the smoke? Like, how many times can you watch people sit in a freezer at the back of a grocery store and talk about how are they gonna?
Well, what would?
I'm sure the pilot would be great. I just don't know if it'll.
Well, what would sustain it would be obviously
Nudity.
great characters. You know,
No,
like,
nudity. Gore.
well, yeah, nudity and gore. Great characters, and you remember that Sean Cassidy series, Invasion? You guys remember that?
You really liked it, didn't you?
I really liked it, but you know what was one of the great things about it were the richness of the characters and the situations. You know, it wasn't just some Todd People sci-fi show. It was more than that.
Well,
And
we'll have to see, won't we?
that's what the Mist needs to do.
We'll have to see if it's as crappy as the Dome or whatever.
Under the
I
dome.
couldn't
Under,
get
it's like then it's gonna.
episode 1 of the Dome.
We'll all die a painful death with the series. Now, Phil, about the movie, I remember watching it in color on cable, and it didn't do a boatload for me because I thought the monsters all looked so fakey. But then I went to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. They had it on the big screen, and it was the black and white version. I got to tell you, I thought it was dynamite.
I wish I had seen that black and white version. I'd love to be able to watch that.
So it.
Well, why do you have the mist? You just put the mist on and then flip the color down on your TV.
Yeah, wouldn't be able to. I don't think I can tell you how to do that on my TV. I can. My kid knows how to do everything. I can turn it on and off. And
Right,
I'm
exactly.
lucky I can get the volume to go up and down. It's got like one button on the fucking controller, and the way you press it does everything. I don't know how it works.
Rick.
Talk to it.
Did we ever discuss the trailer for Stranger Things season 2?
I thought it looked pretty good, and you guys know how I felt about season 1. I thought it was dragged on a bit.
But I'm just saying that seems to be headed towards something like The Mist. We saw this huge monster seemingly invading the town.
That's true.
Yeah, I guess the under becomes the over, or the under invades the over, is what I heard, where all the dark creatures live.
And what's the over-under on that?
I'm very excited to be the wrong word to use, but I'm very intrigued by the Castle Rock idea, the J.J. Abrams series, where they're going to take all the Stephen King characters and make a TV series out of that. I'm very curious to see how that is pulled off. Like it's the whole universe of Stephen King in the TV show.
Will it be I got the impression it was going to be more like an anthology. A series of standalone stories all in the same place.
Yeah, maybe.
That sounds more accurate, actually. That makes more sense. I mean, all right. So Fedogan and Bremer sent me this. Rick, I know you got a copy too. It's Earth, Air, Fire, and Water by Brian Lumley. 4 tales of elemental mythos horror. And look, if you're into this, if you're into Brian Lumley, if you're into Lovecraft, and I assume you are if you're listening to the sound of my voice, or at least cosmic horror. I've not read this yet, but man, I've read Brian Lumley. I like Brian Lumley. This is a nice hardcover book. If you're interested, just go to Fedogan and Bremer's website.
This is interesting for a couple reasons. First of all, I think there's a brand new novella in here.
Yes.
Lumley doesn't really write in the mythos anymore. That was a feature of his youth. You know, when he was in the army and got out of the army until he hit on his Necroscope series. And now he barely touches the stuff. He's got other interests. So he came back to it for one of these 4 novellas. The others, if you notice, they're all reprints.
One of the reprints is for a story I didn't have. So if you've been collecting Lumley, you probably only have half the contents of this book at most.
The other thing that's interesting is there was a Lumley series going on I got with Subterranean Press. They were very similar appearing books. The art was by Bob Eggleton, you know, that matchless painter who does those wonderful Cthulhu covers. There were the stories from the Primal Land, the Complete Titus Crow, the Taint and Other Novellas, and Hagopian. And the only thing I'm curious about is why did he switch to Fedogan and Bremer for this? And it's completely unrelated to the content, but here it is. It's almost like another book in this series of retrospective of his mythos-ish works. It's at a different publisher now.
Well,
I don't know.
He's been in I think he wrote at least one original story for those Innsmouth books that Fedogan and Bremer put out.
Uh-huh.
So maybe that established a relationship.
I also want to mention a book called Embers by a guy by the name of Kenneth W. Kane. It's available in print and for Kindle. It's actually free to read on Kindle Unlimited. And I've not read it yet, but it's got a lot of already has a lot of good reviews 4 and 5 star reviews at Amazon. I bring it up because Kenneth W. Kane is a guy who does a lot of work for the Lovecraft eZine website, and the press section of it, helps me get the books looking like they need to look, and so on and so forth. So it's speculative fiction, so definitely check it out if you're looking for something to read.
Can
Yeah.
I want to recommend a book you can get for free. There's a novel written in 1921 by a woman named Eleanor Ingram called The Thing from the Lake. It's available for free on Kindle from Amazon. It was read by Lovecraft in 27, recommended to August Derlitz. It's sort of a love story, cosmic horror style. It's pretty good until the end where it kind of falls apart. But it's a major influence on the Dunwich Horror and the Lurker of the Threshold.
Okay. Free on Kindle, you said?
Yes, it's Eleanor Ingram, The Thing from the Lake.
The Thing from the Lake. Okay. I know that Philip really wants to talk about the movie Split. So, right? You do, don't you?
If you guys have seen, if you haven't seen it, we can't talk about it.
Have you guys seen Split?
No, but it doesn't matter.
No, you can still talk about it though.
Well, I was going to give a spoiler alert because I can't talk about it without mentioning the end, I guess.
Well, that's what all my questions are about. I mean, not questions.
All right, let's talk about it. You two can leave if you if you really don't want to know. But okay, so everybody listening to the podcast, you've been warned. For the next 5 minutes, we're going to talk about Split. So either fast forward us or turn us off, whatever you want to do.
The shocking surprise twist at the end of Split.
I didn't think it was that shocking, actually.
I didn't think it was either, but I want to make sure people
the
are.
whole movie was very predictable.
Wait, okay, so here's my thing, and I think, and I don't want to. I would never want to speak for Kelly Young, but he and I have discussed it.
No,
and
God, no. You might, yeah, he might beat the hell out of you.
You'll see. I'll see when these boxes pop up and they'll on the bottom of the screen, and he'll be.
I'll get a text in a minute.
Yeah, but I know that we both feel the same way, which is that the movie itself is a standalone film. To your point, I was watching it, and I know how much the movie made. It made $300 million worldwide. It was really well reviewed. People were going out talking about it.
M. Night Shyamalan's big comeback, yeah.
Big comeback movie, and I'm watching this movie, and it's good. James McAvoy is great, but nothing's happening, and you're watching it, and literally at the 1 hour mark, I paused it so I could see how much time was left on the bar. I'm like, oh my God, there's another 51 minutes of this movie. It's a 2 hour movie. And yeah, and even at the end, I'm like, well, they're telegraphing this guy. The beast is coming, he's going to eat you. And then, like, what happens? The beast comes and it eats them. So I'm trying to figure out, well, yeah, so I don't understand why that is supposed to be interesting to me as a viewer, because that's what you've been telegraphing the whole movie. So
yeah, I missed a little bit since I got kicked out for a second for some reason, but it sounds like what you're saying is that it was pretty predictable to you too. I mean, they were telegraphing nothing. Yeah,
in the first act, if in the first act of a movie I say, okay, here's how the movie's going to end. It's going to end with this me turning into a bad beast-like creature and eating you girls, and then that's exactly how it ends. I'm debating what the merits of.
How is that a surprise? How did anyone not see that coming?
Yeah, and to me, it was just like, I kept waiting for something to happen that would surprise me or, frankly, interest me. Great, and even the scenes with the therapist, and it was just a lot of mumbo jumbo, and and then of course you get to the end, and you realize, in a way, you've been duped, because the movie isn't a standalone movie. It's an origins story. As a setup, it's a prequel to the next Unbreakable movie, which is the big twist at the end.
Yeah, and it also seems to imply that Bruce Willis is unbreakable because he believes he's unbreakable.
You know.
No, I didn't go. I didn't take it that far.
You didn't. That's sort of what. And that Mr. Glass is breakable because he believes he's breakable. That's what I got from it. Who knows?
I think
But
he's just.
I had the same reaction that you had. That it was not a bad movie, but there was no, there was no element of, wow, I didn't see that coming. Nothing like that.
Right. There's no element of. I was never tense to me. I was never. No points I put my hand over my face, which I do quite a bit during movies. I'm kind of a
Plus,
really,
really,
I was just kind of like, really? That's what I'm like. He told us that's what was going to happen, so now it happened. I don't understand why he told us. It's nothing.
Riddle me this. So if saying the guy's name makes him revert to his base persona, the therapist knew this. Why didn't she say his name before she got her
I think
bones
she
snapped?
tried to, but she was so scared. She was like stuttering it out. Like she was like, and then like then he squeezed her.
No, that's a cop out.
I know, but if you watch that scene again, she's kind of like wants to say it, and then but it's like the words aren't coming.
Well, that's not polite. He should have said, "What? Before I kill you, what is it you're trying to say?"
Yeah, he should have given her a moment to catch her breath and to
exactly.
regroup.
So
and then of course,
if somebody had not told me, they'd have just said, "Watch this movie. It's another M. Night Shyamalan movie." I would have thought, yeah, M. Night Shyamalan underwhelms again. But this is supposedly his big comeback movie that's just so awesome, and I don't get it at all.
If it wasn't for the Unbreakable tag, I don't think the movie would have made half of what it made, and I don't think people would be telling other people to go. Because here's what happens: people see that movie, they sit through the whole thing, they're like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of scary, I guess, and kind of interesting," and then it ends, and you walk out of the theater one of two ways. You walk out of the theater saying, like, "Okay, well, I've already forgotten what that movie was about. Let's go get a hamburger," or you walk out of the movie theater saying, "Oh my God, I've got to tell my friends to go see this movie." And the genius of putting a twist like that at the end of the film, which is why Marvel movies started doing it in the first place, is so that you walk into the theater saying, "Oh my God, you have to go see this movie," and make sure you watch all the way to the end because something crazy happens at the end. So now all of a sudden,
if only had been preceded by a better movie, then you know what I mean.
And I will say, but I don't think the movie, and this is what we're saying, I don't think it's a bad film. I think it's a really good film. I just don't think it's an interesting film. I think it's worth seeing for James McAvoy's performance because it's fantastic. The scene where he is in the psychiatrist's office and she's calling him Dennis, saying, "Dennis, I know it's you, I know it's you," and he's like, "No, you're wrong, it's Byron," or whatever. And then he slowly kind of morphs into this Dennis. And then at the end, when he's confronting this, when all of his personas are explode, because she says this is his real name, and so all of a sudden all his personas are kind of being jumbled around, and he's going through them sort of rapid fire. I thought that was I thought I was really impressed.
Oh, there's no question. If you want to watch a movie with some great acting in it, this is the movie.
Yeah.
But doesn't save the plot. But anyway.
No.
So the verdict is it's competently made but predictable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very predictable.
And it has a provocative tag.
Yeah. The verdict is don't spend money on it. Watch it when it comes on Netflix. You'll be somewhat entertained, maybe. So.
And it will be interesting to see what he does with Unbreakable 3, if that ends up being Mr. Glass and the Horde, which is what they're calling James McAvoy's character, and Bruce Willis is back. I would go see that I'd go see that in the theater. I'd be very interested.
The Horde throws Bruce Willis into a pool of water.
He's already been thrown into a pool of water.
So, yeah, that's his kryptonite.
I know, they'll have to throw him into some other kind of water. Maybe he'll spray him with a garden hose. I don't know.
I kind of liked Unbreakable, after having watched the Sixth Sense, which was, utterly brilliant movie. And I ended up kind of liking Unbreakable. So, like, in the end, it's like Bruce Willis bursts through the door and save him like Hudson Hawk or something.
In what? In
Split.
Split? No, it's almost like an after credits scene. He's sitting in a cafe and somebody asks him a question. All of a sudden, there's Bruce Willis. He's not been in there the entire movie. So.
Yeah, and somebody says, wasn't there a
He's
guy?
not part of the plot in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, Matt.
It's a total cameo.
All right. Well,
But what it does is it ties. What it does is it reveals that the movie you just watched is a prequel to the next Unbreakable movie. That's what
And
it
it's in the
reveals.
same universe as Unbreakable.
Which is
Yeah,
like
that's the other.
which is kind of cool. Like it's a cool idea. I like
Sure.
that he did it. I think it's neat. I wish the movie had been. I wish the movie had been more interesting, or scarier, or had its own. I wish the movie had its own interesting twist or spin. And when I say that, I don't mean an M. Night Shyamalan. Oh my God, my brain just blew out the back of my head. Just like any movie where you see you want the third act to be surprising. You know, I wish the movie had been more surprising.
What happened was exactly what I thought would happen.
That's exactly what he told you would happen. That was the worst part. The actor saying, "Let me tell you what's going to happen in the third act. I'm going to turn into a beast-like creature. I'm going to have kind of superpowers, and I'm going to eat all of the girls." And literally, that's exactly what happens.
They're sacred food. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So the only surprise is that it's a crossover to Unbreakable.
Right.
That's correct. All right. So not to beat a dead horse, but that's split.
I'm shocked it made as much money as it did. Shocked. Goes to show you the power of word of mouth.
That was the real twist.
Yeah.
How much money you made?
Well, they made the movie for $9 million and made 300 plus. It's a pretty good deal.
That's why it's a comeback.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice comeback for him.
All right. We have anything else to talk about? Saw Lake Mungo last night too. Have you seen that?
I've seen it. I know Paul Tremblay loved that movie. He talked a lot about it.
Paul did, really?
Yeah, he was really talking a lot about it and saying how good a movie he thought it was. And I watched it based on that recommendation. I personally thought it was kind of slow.
Well, yeah,
really get into it.
It's a faux documentary. The really funny part is, I watched it with Danielle and I convinced her. She's still convinced it's a real documentary.
Well,
I have to break it to her sometime. What?
how does she put up with you?
I don't know. I have no idea. She doesn't drink, so that's not an answer.
I have not seen the doc. What's the documentary that's about the sleep paralysis? Have you?
Oh yeah, that's on Netflix.
Have you seen that?
The Nightmare.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
I've heard
I've not seen it, but I heard it's good. But I thought there were some genuinely creepy scenes in Lake Mungo.
Yeah. I think I was watching it one night when I was really tired, and I remember just kind of like falling asleep.
Yeah, there's no question is that you have to go mindset that it is a bit slow, you know. But with that in mind, I thought it was pretty good. So Paul Tremblay liked it a lot. Huh? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I'm reading the last thing I'll mention. I wanted to, because I know I'm interested you. I'm reading The Night Ocean. I'm halfway through it. Interesting take.
Oh, The Night Ocean. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I got a question about The Night Ocean. By the way, it's a beautiful book.
Right there. Yeah.
I noticed some hardcore Lovecraft fans really hate this book. Have you seen that?
Well, you guys were talking about earlier, like Matt was saying, every time you mention Lovecraft, you have to talk about his sexuality and prejudices, and that book really, boy, it really goes for it. I read the first half, and with the diary, the fake. I
got the impression they were upset because it basically says that he was gay.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, and there's no inference. It's pretty much.
Yeah, I've not read it all yet.
I'm halfway through.
But it's just like any other fictional book that features Lovecraft. I mean, they don't get upset about other fictional versions of H.P. Lovecraft. Why get upset about this one?
Well, they say he's gay and that he's having sex with minors. Double whammy.
Oh, was he a minor?
16.
That is bad. Yeah.
So I'm waiting to see what the second half of the book reveals. I'm very curious to see where it's going.
Yeah, you'll have to tell me what you think. I sort of paused reading it reading a book
Yeah,
right now
I couldn't.
called-
I had to take a break because I had to take a break from it only because of the nature of the content. It got kind of disturbing after a while, and it was kind of repetitive entries about Lovecraft, having sex with this kid, and it kind of was like, Jesus, like, I need to read something else for a little bit, and it kind of goes on for a good 50 pages.
Okay, now hang on a second. This is another issue I have with the publication or philosophy or mindset at Tor. Is they had a fawning review of this book.
Is it a Tor book? I don't remember.
I don't know who published it.
I'll look while you're talking.
But the thing is, here again, you have like
Penguin Press.
something that is basically assailing Lovecraft's character or putting it into a context of a certain fan group's popular response to Lovecraft. I'm not even phrasing this well. I just think it's like, and then they say it's so great because of that. And I want a description of what about on its own merits? Does it stand as a work? That's more what I'm interested in. It's like the fact that it infers that he was gay, that he was misogynistic or whatever, which maybe he really wasn't, I'm not interested in that being the basis for a favorable or an unfavorable review.
Well,
It,
certain things aside, first of all, the book has to be entertaining.
Right.
So,
I just have a question for Phil since he's read it. Did it go into his very anti-gay attitudes in New York?
I'm only halfway through, and what it is it's a fake. She's reading a book that's made up, but it's supposedly a journal a lost journal that Lovecraft wrote. So there's the introduction of the book, the novel Night Ocean goes for about 23 pages, and then there's like this 50 to 60 page book that you're reading his journal entries. And it covers, and he's very homophobic and racist and all that stuff in the commentary. But he's also duplicitous in that he has this relationship with this young kid, this homosexual relationship with a young boy. But so it doesn't. It's hard to say whether it's not really fact. It's not even fact in the novel itself. It's a made up book in the novel that you end up finding out that been done to make a quick buck. But that's as far as I've gotten in the. I
remember now because it's been like, excuse me, 2 or 3 months. I got to the Florida scenes with R.H. Barlow. Yeah. And couldn't really stomach it very well, and I stopped.
That's what was very same for me. It was a little too much.
Yeah.
It's one thing if it's like you hit on it and you move on, but it's when it's over and over and over, it keeps going forever. It's hard to keep reading it.
So I guess I can kind of see what they're pissed off about.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd be pissed off. It's just like, why should I bother opening a book? It's kind of my view. It's like, this is the content. It sounds pretty tedious.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. If people are getting defensive for Lovecraft, then I don't think he cares anymore, frankly.
No, I don't think he does either.
I think he's good.
All right. We have anything else to talk about? Excuse me.
Just a reminder of the shirt prize.
Yeah. There's I'll link to this on the Facebook page. There's a headline at Yahoo from April the 6th. Guillermo del Toro still thwarted in quest to film H.P. Lovecraft's Mountains of Madness.
Happens.
Once again, it will not happen.
Well, I was very interested to see that the Lock and Key series was revitalized. That was dead in the water. They made a pilot. It didn't. They never made the pilot, I guess. Then the Joe Hill graphic novel series, and now it's back, and they're making it with Scott Derrickson, who did Doctor Strange. and it's a bit, so sometimes things that go, the second time around, you never
You know
know.
what should really happen is not a movie. It should get the Amazon Prime or Netflix treatment at the Mountains of Madness. That's what should happen. It should get the Bosch treatment.
That's where the easy money is, man. The Hulu, Amazon, those guys who are making the made the TV series.
It's a golden age for TV series.
Golden age. Lots as a screenwriter, I can tell you, there's a much bigger market now to sell original ideas, than there ever was.
And I'll tell you what else should get the Bosch Amazon Prime / Netflix treatment is Matthew Scudder. Wouldn't that be pretty awesome?
Who's Matthew Scudder?
Lawrence Block, Matthew
Oh,
Scudder.
the Lawrence Block. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, he's built for it even more than Bosch is.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that was never done in film for film or TV. That character. Lawrence Block is a pretty big deal.
No, there's been a couple of movies.
Right. Yeah, good.
Most recently, A Walk Among the Tombstones.
Right. Oh yeah, of course.
Which
Yeah.
was very dark and very good.
I enjoyed it.
Well, was that a Scudder or was that something else?
No, that was Scudder.
That was Scudder. Okay.
Yeah, he's my favorite detective. Very good. And A Walk Among the Tombstones is I thought was very well done. Was very faithful to the spirit of Matthew Scudder.
More than Marlowe.
I don't know.
I'm a Raymond Chandler fan. So.
All right. What was the noir series I was talking about early in the show, Matt? Bosch. Harry Bosch.
Okay.
The name of the series is Bosch.
Which is on.
B-O-S-C-H.
Where is it? Is it
Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to. Don't come back till you do.
I won't. I promise.
All right. So if you want Matt's King in Yellow drive you insane, what is a sweatshirt
It's a
prize?
bowling shirt, kind of.
It's a bowling shirt. If you want to bowl to insanity, send an email to Lovecraft eZine prizes @gmail.com. I guess just put shirt in the subject line. And by the way, if you enjoy the show, I mean, it seems like more and more people listen to the show every week. And if you've never written, I love hearing from people who like the show. Just email lovecraftezine@gmail.com. Tell me you like the show. That'll make my day. So anyway, guys, thanks. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks, Philip, for doing the interview. Appreciate it.
Of course, it was fun.
And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks.